On behalf of several of our team who are on the call today, I just want to say thank you for joining us. And I'll turn it right over to Beth Whitaker, who is the Associate Dean and Director of the Spencer Research Library. So thank you for joining us, Beth.
Great, okay. Thank you, thank you. I put this background up thinking that it would be, a really nice, beautiful spring day that would be cheerful in our dreary December day. But for those of you in Lawrence or nearby, it's gorgeous today. So it's almost this beautiful on the hill today. Thank you so much for welcoming me and my colleagues to this meeting. It's always exciting to talk to a bunch of passionate Jayhawks about the university archives, and it's part of Spencer Research Library. And for those of you who don't know, our building is located right behind Strong Hall, right off Jayhawk Boulevard. And we are thrilled to be back in business after the campus closures of last year. It just wasn't really the same to be operating without being as open as we could be to our researchers and the public. I think if I had been talking to a group of people who are not librarians and archivists, even just a few years ago, I might have started with a little bit more explanation about university archives and the concept of the archives. But I think the phrases archives and archiving have really been trendy for a while now, and you hear about people archiving their family photos or archiving old recipes or even archiving playlists. And so that's a good start for understanding what archives are about. And at KU, the university archives are the records of the history of KU. And that includes official records like office files, publications, yearbooks, that kind of thing. But also unofficial sources that give us a fuller picture of what life was like for Jayhawks in the past and right up to the present, actually. And so things like posters, ticket stubs, correspondence, and over 1 million photographs are a big part of the university archives too. And they tell the story of the university from its founding and even before its founding to the present, and we aim at all sorts of audiences: scholars who might be researching the history of a particular academic discipline or a particular figure, family members who are looking for photos of grandparents, or elementary school students who like to learn more about the Jayhawk mascot, and everybody in between. Archivists and librarians at Spencer teach classes to KU students and also to students in regional and local other institutions, K through 12, even the occasional preschool. And boy, let me tell you, that's something. We lead tours, we answer reference questions, and we support cataloging, digitization, and conservation of photos, books, magazines, and even objects like freshman beanies and corncob pipes. And if you don't know the significance of those two objects to KU history, you definitely need to visit us. We take very seriously the belief that while we are responsible for caring for these resources, the only reason that we have them and that they've been entrusted to us is so that KU and people across the world can use them to help them better understand our world, the world of KU. I hope you've had a chance to see a library exhibit either in person or on campus, or at one of our smaller traveling exhibits or events, such as the ones that we love to do with the Alumni Association. We like to give people a little bit of time travel that might remind them of their time on campus, no matter where your life has taken you after graduation. And we also want to deepen your knowledge and appreciation for KU by highlighting the rare and unique materials that we have as part of KU, and our collections at Spencer across the board really set KU apart from its peers. We haven't been able to be on the road for a while, since 2020, but as campus is slowly getting back to hosting in-person events, we are very excited to share a preview for 2 exhibits that we will be bringing to the pregame audience of the President's Club in the coming months, and those will be live and in person. And I think that they will be our first live and in-person external events, maybe not. So very, very close to the first ones. And it's great to have that with the Alumni Association. So sharing with us the exhibit Rev Up the Rivalry is, I just love saying that, that's going to be my colleague, Molly Herring, who's our associate archivist. And Molly has been on board. She came to back to KU in February of 2020. So needless to say, her time at KU has been very interesting because things started to happen very quickly right after she arrived. And then she got to step up as our longtime university archivist, Becky Schulte, moves into phased retirement. So for those of you who have encountered Becky wearing one of her many hats during her long career, you know that she leaves very big shoes to fill. But before I give this to Molly, I'm excited to be able to welcome and announce our new university archivist. And this is, I think, her first public appearance as university archivist, Letha Johnson. And Letha may be a familiar face to some of you if you've worked with the archives in the past. She was the associate archivist for 10 years, and then recently served as the curator of the Kansas collection here in Spencer Research Library. So Letha actually began her role as university archivist on Monday. And so Letha, do you want to, I can't see everybody at once, but can other people see Letha?
Yeah, I'm here, Beth.
Okay. So
yeah, go ahead. Oh, I just wanted to say hello to everyone and that I'm really excited to be back in University Archives. And I'm looking forward to taking on new challenges in this position and to help tell the stories that are in KU's history. So thank you.
So with that, I will pass things over to Molly, who is going to give you a lot of great information about KU rivalries, and it's very exciting. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Beth, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm really excited to be here and get to share a sneak preview of this upcoming exhibit with you all. I'm going to share my screen really quickly. Let's see. Oops. All right, can everyone see the presentation? Can everyone hear me? Okay, great. See some thumbs up, so we're good to go. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having us today. As Beth said, my name is Molly Herring, and I am the Associate Archivist at the University of Kansas Archives. And it is with great excitement that I'm giving you all a sneak preview of the University Archives' upcoming Rev Up the Rivalry exhibit, which focus on two of KU's greatest rivalries with the University of Missouri and the University of Kentucky. Both will be set up at the Alumni Association's pregame events, one on December 11th, which is next Saturday, and on January 29th. All of the items in this presentation will be included in the in-person exhibits, along with additional photos and memorabilia. So if you want to get the full scale, you'll just have to come and visit us. A rivalry born out of nothing but sheer skill, the Kansas-Kentucky rivalry comes from two of the most winningest, and yes, that is a word, programs in the country. The two schools have met yearly since 1971 and often end up facing each other in the NCAA tournament. As of the last complete season, KU is second only to Kentucky in total number of basketball wins. Now, numbers vary from source to source, but the number of wins is currently somewhere around 2,310 for KU and 2,319 for Kentucky. It is very possible that in upcoming seasons, KU could surpass Kentucky as the top or the most winningest basketball program in the country. And while it might not be as bitter or long of a rivalry as the other topic of this presentation, Kansas's rivalry with Missouri, the Kentucky-KU competition is not without its moments and connections. Adolph Rupp was a member of the KU basketball team from 1919 to 1923, placing him on the roster of what are widely considered to be two of the best teams in KU's history, the 1922 and 1923 squads, both of which had important face-offs against Missouri, which I'll touch on in more depth later. Adolph Rupp later went on to coach for the University of Kentucky for their men's basketball team from 1930 to 1972. He has one of the best coaching records in their program's history, and the school arena is named after him. Phog Allen, who was coaching during Rupp's tenure at KU, kept up with Rupp even after he left, and not just because the two of them faced off as coaches. In the letter shown on the left side of the screen, which comes from Phog Allen's personal papers, the entirety of which is digitized and available on the Spencer Research Library website, was written in response to Allen's correspondent sending him a newspaper clipping about Adolph Rupp. In his letter, Allen writes, "It is always good to hear about our old boys, and Adolph Rupp has certainly gone a long way since he left Kansas." As another former coach, Ted Owens, said in a 1983 basketball program for the annual KU Kentucky game, "We look forward to playing Kentucky. In the past, Kansas-Kentucky games have always been hard-fought and good ball games for the fans to watch." That sentiment apparently doesn't only apply to games in which KU and Kentucky play each other. As can be seen from the Lawrence Journal World clipping on the right side of the screen, which details how KU fans celebrated Kansas's win and Kentucky's loss, even though the two teams hadn't actually played each other. Kentucky was knocked out of the NCAA tournament by the University of Alabama Birmingham, on the same night that KU beat the University of the Pacific, which sent KU to the Sweet 16. In relation to Kentucky's loss, one fan interviewed said, "It's huge, bigger than a KU win." And while Kentucky's loss may have outranked KU's win in importance during that 2004 NCAA tournament, that certainly can't be said for KU's blowout win against Kentucky on December 9th, 1989. A famous game in the history of both programs in which all the photos on the screen are from. The Wildcats led 16-11 at the beginning of the game, but pretty soon the only thing they were leading in was fouls, of which they committed 35 during the course of the game. KU squashed that lead quickly by scoring an unprecedented 80 points in the first half of the game. It's one of the highest scoring games in Allen Fieldhouse, and KU went on to beat Kentucky 150-95, which is the second widest margin of defeat in Kentucky's program's history. The photo shown on the previous slide and this slide, as well as the program for that game, of which the cover is on the right side of the screen, will be displayed at the January 29th pregame event. Despite its newness compared to some of the other KU rivalries, there's no doubting that the KU Kentucky series has earned its place in KU basketball history and tradition. While it may be the second topic in this presentation, the KU Missouri exhibit will be the first one displayed at a pregame event at the Missouri game on December 11th, which is next Saturday. A rivalry that Sports Illustrated called the oldest west of the Mississippi, the KU-Missouri rivalry is truly infamous in the world of sports and in its respective states. The upcoming exhibit celebrates this old and tense competition between these two programs and the story of the rivalry that is found in the university archives, from which all of the items in the exhibits come from, can be divided into three major parts, and the first of which is the games themselves. The first game played against Missouri in what would become known as the Border War and later the Border Showdown was a football game in 1891. Not many years later, in 1907, the first set of basketball games were played in Columbia, Missouri. Missouri won both of those games, the first 34-31 and the second 34-12. That left Missouri with an all-time 2-0 record against the Jayhawks, whose coach at the time was the inventor of basketball, James Naismith. However, those early victories were in no way indicative of where the series would go. KU currently leads the all-time basketball series against Missouri 172 games to 95 games. Missouri may have departed the Big 12 Conference in 2012, but in the 105 years of official games, there were certainly many memorable ones. From Missouri registering the largest victory in Allen Fieldhouse by an opposing team, the margin of victory was 25 points, a feat only recently matched at the end of 2020 by the Texas Longhorns, to KU being the first visiting team to score 100 points at Missouri's Hearn Center. The series has held the highs and lows of both teams. However, the games most symbolic of the rivalry are the ones that showcase what it might be most known for, its nastiness. During the 1907-1908 basketball season, both basketball teams had members of their school's respective football teams on them. Kansas was 8-0 when Missouri came to Lawrence for a pair of Missouri Valley Conference games, which were described in an official report as a cross between a basketball game and a wrestling match, with a generous sprinkling of football thrown in. James Naismith, who had envisioned a game without the roughness of football when he invented basketball, attended the second game of the set, and Naismith was heard to exclaim sometime into the battle, "Oh no, oh gracious, they are murdering my game." In the finals of the 1951 Big Seven Holiday Tournament, Kansas center Clyde Lovellette stomped on the stomach of Missouri star Win Wolfon. He was ejected from the game and reprimanded by coach Phog Allen, and Missouri coach Wilbur Stallcup worked the microphone to calm down the outraged Tiger fans and earned the respect of Phog Allen in the meantime, despite the fact that the two had previously been enemies. Despite that, Kansas won the game and the tournament 75-65. And during a 1961 game in which Missouri lost to Kansas, a bench-clearing fistfight erupted between the two teams. And afterward, the athletic director for KU at the time suggested that the rivalry be discontinued. But in the return match following that game, another fistfight exploded, but this time it involved fans as well. And yet, the rivalry continued. In a 1997 program for a Kansas versus Missouri basketball game, which you can see on the right here and will be included in the December 11th exhibit, a section detailing the rivalry that's called "Let's Get Ready to Rumble" gave some further insight into just how physical the games could get. The meeting previous to that February 1997 game featured a total of 53 fouls and 5 disqualifications, 3 of which were Jayhawks. Former KU player Bud Stallworth probably said it best when discussing his time at KU and the Missouri rivalry when he said, "It was Missouri, man. It doesn't get better than that." Coach Norm Stewart and I had a running feud for a couple years. He really had his guys hating the University of Kansas. When you played Missouri, it was like you stole something from their mamas. Every time I played against them, I had one of my better games. In his last game in Allen Fieldhouse, Stallworth went on to score a conference record 50 points against Missouri. As that quote from Stallworth shows, the games themselves may be intense, but sometimes it only takes one person to rev up a rivalry. And while the KU-Missouri rivalry may trace its roots back to that first football game in 1891, it's in basketball, where it is perhaps most intense, and that is partially in thanks to Phog Allen. In his book, The University of Kansas Basketball Vault, The History of the Jayhawks, Ken Davis said, "Beating Missouri is important. Reunions and championship anniversaries are important, and the man sitting in the coach's chair is important, all because of Allen." Allen is credited with revving up the rivalry with Mizzou, and that credit is not undeserved. According to player Paul Endicott, Allen said to his wife that he would quit coaching if he didn't beat Mizzou at least twice. And he had little to worry about on that front, 2 standout games were played and won against Missouri at the beginning of his second tenure as coach. On February 1st, 1922, Kansas beat Missouri 26-16 in Columbia. Missouri was undefeated at the time and on its way to gaining a 3rd consecutive Missouri Valley Conference championship when Allen and the Jayhawks came calling. Kansas led 12-10 at halftime and increased that margin in the second half. Missouri finished with only 5 field goals, which, in case anyone is like me and is less familiar with basketball terminology, is a shot. It's a basket scored on any shot other than a free throw. And Kansas had the upset that would win them their first Helms Foundation national championship. The following year, on February 29th, 1923, there was much at stake. Although the Jayhawks had defeated Missouri earlier that season, Kansas had to win the regular season finale over the Tigers to win its first outright lead championship since 1915, as they had to share the previous year's championship with the Tigers. Kansas ended up beating Missouri 23-20. And Phog Allen called the season ever victorious, which you can see inscribed at the bottom of the team photo on the right. The Jayhawks completed that year with a 16-0 conference record, which stands as Kansas's greatest league mark. And the 1923 team proved pivotal in the program's history. Kansas supplanted Missouri as the dominant program in the Missouri Valley Conference, and the championship that year was the second of 6 consecutive for Kansas. Additionally, the Helms Foundation named Kansas the national champion for the 2nd year straight. And both the 1923 and 1922 national championship banners can still be seen hanging in Allen Fieldhouse. Additionally, some items for the Mizzou exhibit were pulled from Phog Allen's personal papers, which, as I mentioned earlier, are completely digitized and available on the Spencer Research Library website. The shot chart on the left comes from a Missouri game played on March 6, 1942. Shotting charts are used to help coaches identify players' strengths, weaknesses, and ultimately give insights to improve a team's overall shooting percentage. Here you can see Phog Allen kept a record of Missouri's shots as well as KU's. And while only Missouri's shot chart is shown here, both Missouri and Kansas's shot charts will be in the exhibit next weekend, so be sure and come by to see them both. Another item found in Phog Allen's papers is this note on the right from a spirited basketball fan that reads, "A Kansas-Missouri conflict is always unpredictable, but the intelligence and fight of our Kansas varsity basketeers is consistently dependable. 4,000 right honorable, loyal sons and daughters on Mount Oread believe you will do it, varsity gang. A team that won't be beaten can't be beaten. Yay, Kansas." No matter the decade, Kansas fans have never wavered in their desire to beat Mizzou and their belief in their Jayhawks. Which leads me to one of the other staples of this great rivalry, the fans. KU and Missouri fans have both long upheld the rivalry outside of their respective field houses. And if you've ever driven in Missouri with Kansas plate or stickers, you might have an idea of what I'm talking about. Although, as I'm sure we all know, KU has its own ways of revving up the hostility as well. In the early 1900s, there was a tradition of the Tiger Bonfire before Missouri football games, where KU would hold a bonfire and place an effigy of a tiger atop the pile before lighting it. In the center photo on this slide, you can see a wide shot of one of those bonfires, but if you come to the exhibit, we will also have a close-up. A University Daily Kansan article from 1972 details a prank played by Missouri fans when the KU flag that was flying atop Frazier Hall was found to have been defaced with a crudely drawn MU under the KU on the flag. And no one's quite sure how that was managed because the culprit would have had to pass through 3 locked doors in order to do so. but hey, you find a way when it's a rivalry like KU and Missouri's. And two separate t-shirt controversies erupted on either end of the rivalry in the early 2000s. The first was KU's somewhat infamous, and I'm going to say this slowly, Muck Mizzou. Yes, shirts. It is what you're thinking. ESPN refused to film KU's student section because of the shirts, and a meeting was held by the Student Athletic Advisory Committee to find an alternative to the quote unquote offensive shirts. But a slightly more dramatic controversy erupted on Missouri's side when Missouri fans created a Quantrill's Rage shirt that rapidly drew ire from KU fans. The yellow shirt had a depiction of Civil War era Lawrence on it, on fire, and the words scoreboard and the tiger logo beneath it. The back of the shirt included a quote from Quantrill that read, "Raise the black flag and ride hard, boys. Our cause is just and our enemies many." And after the initial stir caused after a photo of the shirt circulated online, the producer of the shirt, who was a Missouri alum, decided to not sell or continue producing them. I wonder why. And while this rivalry may often be less than cordial, sometimes it is all in good fun. The photo on the far right shows the KU students holding up University Daily Kansas at a KU Missouri game in 1995. This is a long-standing KU tradition where the student section in Allen Fieldhouse holds up sections of the student newspaper, which usually have specially printed editions for games, during the announcement of the opposing team. This is to give the impression that students are reading the newspaper and is done to highlight their disinterest in the opposing team. In the photo, you can also see one student with a sign that says, "Sit down, Norm." A common chant in Allen Fieldhouse during Missouri coaches Norm Stewart's Storm and Norman days was "Sit down, Norm," whenever he would jump off the bench to argue a call. However, at a halftime show during a 2003 game against Texas, the former Missouri coach was presented with a rocking chair by KU. For the only time ever, he was told to sit down, Norm, good-naturedly. And so ends our sneak preview. While these rivalries may often be bitter and cantankerous, they always make for good basketball. And we hope to see many of you in person at the December 11th Missouri pregame event and the January 29th Kentucky pregame event, where all of these items and even more will be on display. Thank you and rock chalk. And now it's time for questions. If any of you have any questions that you would like to ask about the exhibit or about the archives, you can put them in the chat or you can unmute and ask me. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
What was the source of your win totals for Kansas and Kentucky?
It was from an article in the University Daily Kansas, which is why, but I found it a separate article from another KU sports source that listed something different. There seems to be some contention on the exact number, but it is somewhere in the 2300s.
I have something to add. Molly, first of all, great job. A fun fact for this group to underscore how fortunate we are to have Coach Self. When he stepped into the position that he's in, leading our basketball program, the gap between Kentucky and Kansas was 47. And the latest number I've heard was 5. So it's somewhere in that range, Molly. And it would be really fun if we could become the winningest program when we play Kentucky here in late January.
Absolutely. Wouldn't that be something?
And I know some alumni on this screen have that T-shirt she referenced. That's not just students. So Andrew, I know you have one of those in your closet.
No comment.
I actually came home from college wearing one of those T-shirts, and my dad made me quickly take that off. So it was, I almost didn't get to come back to KU after coming home with the Muck Mizzou shirt.
You have to be careful and say it very, very slowly.
You really do. Yes.
Absolutely. Right. Any other questions, stories anyone wants to share about their experience with either of these rivalries?
Molly, I don't have a question exactly or a story to share, but I'm always interested in the process of how in the archives you and Letha and our archivists go through, and with the thousands and thousands of items and photos that we have in the archives, and certainly when it comes to Mizzou, how do you go through and pick your favorites? And that has to be a difficult process for you. What's that like?
I wouldn't say it's difficult. I quite enjoy the research aspect of my job. So it really just starts with kind of cataloging everything I can find, going to sources I know we have, like our photographs or Phog Allen's papers or our basketball records, which include the programs and media guides and things along that nature, looking at our artifacts to see what we might have. And then usually as I'm going through things, I find a narrative that already kind of exists or that I could play into in order to make things make sense. With this exhibit, finding out about Phog Allen's history with Mizzou was really not something I was expecting, but was very excited to find kind of how he revved up that rivalry. And his papers just have a mass of wonderful information. And then, really starting with just compiling a list of sources, what we've got, checking secondary sources for some of the more historical and narrative aspects, and then going from there, picking out what I think would be the most interesting to a wide audience, because what might be interesting to me as an archivist might not appeal to everyone else, and then going from there. Yeah, but I wouldn't say it can be time consuming because we have so much, but I wouldn't call it difficult. It's more it's a fun challenge.
I am Kevin Smith. I'm the Dean of Libraries at KU. And it is great to see a lot of familiar faces on this call. Many of you are faithful friends of the KU Libraries, and we are so grateful for your support. We're keeping our fingers crossed that we can get back to hosting events with your alumni networks around the country and return to bringing you our excellent exhibits from the archives in person, hoping that's going to happen soon. That's really all I need to say, except to say thank you to Heath and to the Alumni Association for inviting the libraries to be part of today's program. We're very grateful for our continued partnership and the opportunity to engage with Jayhawks around the country. So Rock Chalk, thank you all for being here. And Heath, I think now you can close it out.
I jumped the line there a little bit. So thank you, Dean Smith. We appreciate your leadership and the entire team with KU Libraries. I had the fortune of being a part of that, building this partnership earlier in my career, and it's been fun to watch it evolve. I don't think there's a library system and alumni association that work like we do together across the country, and it's really, I think, helped us create some fun programs and bring to life much of the history at the university, which is always fun to be a part of. And I just want to say thank you to all of you for your support of the university. I want to recognize our national chair. We were bragging on Jay for his 5th hole-in-one in golf recently. Jay Cruduss, our national chair, joined us this evening. Thanks for your leadership, Jay. But I see Jayhawks from Arizona, from Ohio, from Kansas City on the screen. You make a considerable difference for the university, and we appreciate your service and your leadership. So with that, I'll give you a big rock chalk, and we'll see you very soon.